Have you ever been scrolling your feed or walking through a crowded city and felt a sudden suspicion that none of it is entirely real? That your interactions, the trending topics, and the societal structures around you are somehow artificially staged? This sense of artificiality stems from a biological vulnerability, a blind spot mapped out by philosophers thousands of years before the first line of code was written. In the 17th century, René Descartes examined how the human mind processes the physical world and realized we are consistently, almost effortlessly, prone to profound delusion. He pointed out that our raw physical senses routinely fail us on the most basic tasks. We look at a piece of polished glass and mistake it for a diamond, or we hold up a piece of copper and are entirely convinced we are looking at solid gold. To prove exactly how deep this sensory failure goes, Descartes pointed to the human sleep cycle. Every single night, your brain generates physical sensations, environments, and narratives during dreams that are so incredibly convincing you cannot reliably distinguish them from waking reality while you are experiencing them. If our optical and tactile nerves cannot be trusted to verify the material in our own hands, or even tell us if we are currently awake, then the entire physical foundation we rely on to understand reality is inherently suspect. Descartes warned that trying to comprehend the true nature of the universe using only physical observation and imagination is an exercise in absurdity. He compared it to a person trying to smell an odor by using their eyes. We have historical proof of humans exploiting this exact biological blind spot. Centuries ago, inventors were already engineering physical reality hacks against their own biology in the form of mechanical automata. Looking at these early facsimiles, Descartes observed that if a machine were perfectly designed to replicate the outward form and physical actions of a human being or an animal, our raw optical senses would be utterly incapable of recognizing the deception. We possess a documented historical vulnerability to being fooled by artificial creations. Relying on passive observation without applying critical reasoning is a trap built into our anatomy. 2,000 years before Descartes, Plato recognized this exact anatomical trap and laid out the original blueprint for what we now call simulation theory. He called it the Allegory of the Cave. Imagine a group of human beings living deep underground. Since childhood, they have been chained by their necks and legs, physically forced to stare straight ahead at a solid blank wall, completely unable to turn their heads. Behind these prisoners, completely out of their restricted sightline, sits a blazing fire. Between that fire and the prisoners is a raised walkway where unseen figures parade various statues, carvings, and physical objects back and forth. Because these prisoners have never seen the fire or the true objects moving along the walkway, their brains do what human brains do. They synthesize the available inputs. They look at the flat, shifting shadows cast on the wall, hear the echoes bouncing off the stone, and accept that two-dimensional projection as the entirety of physical reality. The mechanics of this cave provide a framework for understanding modern information. When we scroll through a digital feed, we are looking at the final, two-dimensional result of unseen actors parading data through a filter. We are reacting to the shadow, while the true source remains hidden behind us. Plato did not stop at describing the environment of the illusion. He explained exactly why human hardware is so easily hijacked by it. He pointed to the basic mechanics of optics. If you take a perfectly straight, rigid wooden stick and submerge half of it in water, the refraction of light causes the stick to appear visibly bent and crooked to the human eye. By understanding these visual flaws, how distance shrinks objects, or how concave surfaces look convex, Plato noted that a skilled painter can use light and shadow to act as a magician, imposing a completely false reality onto a bewildered mind. Our sensory apparatus is biologically programmed to be deceived by nature and by artifice alike. Therefore, any worldview you construct based strictly on what you can passively see and hear is guaranteed to be an illusion. So, what actually happens when a human mind attempts to break free from this architecture and escape the cave? Plato describes the journey up the tunnel not as a moment of peaceful enlightenment, but as a forced, rugged, and deeply irritating physical ascent. When the prisoner is finally dragged to the surface and forced to look at the sun, which Plato uses to represent absolute truth and reason, The immediate exposure to that light completely blinds and disorients them. The immediate psychological reaction is extreme backlash. The freed person will actively fight the dazzle of the light, rejecting the complex reality of the surface and begging to return to the dark, easily understandable shapes on the cave wall. Achieving intellectual clarity is inherently terrifying. It requires the painful, conscious abandonment of our most deeply ingrained biological comforts and our oldest assumptions about how the world works. If that enlightened person decides to descend back into the cave to free the others, they face a new problem. Their eyes are now adjusted to the sun, rendering them severely disoriented and clumsy in the dark. The chained prisoners watch this stumbling, sun-blinded person struggle to identify the old shadows on the wall. To the captives, this clumsiness is absolute proof that leaving the cave ruins you, and they will mock or even attack anyone who tries to unchain them. That hostility from the cave dwellers perfectly mirrors the isolation and pushback you experience when you start questioning the authenticity of modern digital society or stop engaging with the artificial outrage of the day. The modern dread of derealization is the agonizing, necessary first sting of the light. It signals that your rational intellect is finally pushing against the walls of the simulation, recognizing it is time to turn around.